Hello, Vlad with a new story from my channel, Amazing Life Stories. Nin, you should at least remember something. Tatiana felt so sorry for the young stray. She'd joined them, but she didn't know how to beg at all. She was nothing. She'd lived a very difficult life. You can't live counting so many. She had nothing to lose after her husband and children died in a plane crash. And she felt sorry for Ninka. Young, pretty, with white hands, but she clearly had a good life in that other life. Tatiana found her in a dump. They considered not marrying her, but no, they looked after her. But no one was looking for Ninka. Once they recovered, they called Tanya. All because she'd registered herself as a motnina. Well, where were they going to put this girl? She wouldn't last long on the streets. Of course, Tanya has a tent, but still, such a life is not suitable for young people. There were so many bad people out there. How would Tanya protect her if someone completely insane picked on her? To her misfortune, Nina was also pretty. Carrie's eyes were as big as a fawn's, and she was neat and petite, with thick, fluffy hair and a chiseled figure. That's why the elderly beggar was so eager to help Nina remember something. She was afraid she'd die any minute. And who would she trust with that little statue? Tanya, why are you trying to get rid of me like that? Am I really bothering you? Nina's expression immediately turned sad. She remembered that it was true. She rarely managed to beg money from passers-by. And finding anything worthwhile to sell in the trash was also impossible. She was clearly only bringing losses to her patroness. Nina sighed and said, "That's it, I'll go to work, and you'll be glad you found me. As for my past life, I only remember one thing. It's dangerous there, and I wouldn't want to go back there." Quote. Nina wasn't being disingenuous. It was true about the memories. All that remained was a painful feeling of danger. There, in her past, from where Nina had been mercilessly thrown out, only humiliation, fear, and all sorts of horrors awaited her. There wasn't a drop of love there. And Nina didn't want to go back there. She didn't even try to remember anything. She knew she shouldn't. And why she was so sure of it is unknown. It was just her intuition telling her so. She tried to dissuade Tanya from filing a police report so they could find her relatives. But the stubborn granny did it anyway. Luckily, no one was looking for her. So it was time to think about how to live in these new circumstances. That's why Nina decided to get a job somewhere. Secretly from Tanya, Nina had already tried a bunch of places, but as soon as when they found out she had no documents or permanent residence, they immediately gave up. No one needed such problems. But Nina didn't talk about her failures. Strangely, over the course of a couple of months, she had become attached to this stranger. She considered Tatiana either a mother or a friend. She took care of her as best she could, providing her with clothes and food, telling stories about her past, and protecting her from dangerous people. Strangely, this plump woman with huge bruises under faded blue eyes was respected and feared. Nina understood that her friend's health was poor, so it might soon be her turn to take care of her, so she tried her best to find work. So that evening, she put on her most decent clothes. Maybe patched and worn, but neat. An ad in a luxury restaurant caught her eye. They were looking for a dishwasher. Hey, I shouldn't go there. They wouldn't hire me at much more ordinary places. That was her first thought. But then the girl gave up. She had nothing to lose, really. What difference did it make where she went if they always turned her down? What if it was fate? She timidly stepped onto the marble porch beneath the gilded sign. Her legs trembled and trembled. Her face turned as pale as snow. Her nose, meanwhile, turned stupidly red. Nina, seeing her reflection in the panoramic glass, thought she'd be mistaken for a drunken homeless woman, though only the latter was fair. She had no bad habits. Look for someone. The doorman looked rather displeased. Nina heard some noisy voices in the room and thought she'd come at an inopportune time. Apparently, the restaurant was holding a corporate event, so there simply wouldn't be time for her. Ilyich, come on for you. Nina's keen hearing caught such phrases in the room and suddenly realized this name was a clue. Perhaps it would allow entry. Somehow she felt it. If she says she's just looking for a job, they'll just send her away. I'm going to see Igor Ilyich. He invited me in for a talk, Nina forced out. She felt like a fearless adventurer. Nina barely remembered what she really was, but she felt she hardly took risks in her past life. Most likely, she was a thoroughly upright person, the kind of person who anyone could tell what to do and where to go. Maybe even one who swallows any insults with bitter tears, but now she had to fight to get to Igor Ilyich like this. The doorman was clearly doubtful. Apparently, people like Nina had never visited them. Yes, everyone has a poor relative. What, does my appearance bother you? Well, you'll find out, then I'll have to call my uncle. Nina took out her phone with the taped-up screen and pretended to dial a number. In a last desperate attempt, she asked the doorman, "What's your name?" "I just have to tell him who's keeping me out." "Oh, you don't know him." Quote. It was strange, but Nina considered herself an actress in a failed theater. She was chronically bad at lying, for which Tanya constantly scolded her. But the fear of personal responsibility prevailed over the desire to throw her out. The doorman suddenly stood at attention and said, "Let me take your coat." He couldn't hide his disdain at the coat, which was completely unsuitable for winter, or for any other season, for that matter. This outerwear was clearly time to retire. "My name is Alexei." For some reason, the doorman introduced himself. Then he called the waitress, whispered something to her, and she nodded. "Let me take you to Igor Ilyich, or you can find him yourself." The waitress smiled slyly. This was clearly a trick question. And Nina suddenly realized that he was not in the room. If only because the sounds were coming from a compartment behind the wall, and the room was occupied by only a few guests. "Yes, I'll find it." Nina confidently headed toward the hidden room. Apparently, it was reserved for special guests. The waitress's gaze immediately became less suspicious, and she even kindly showed her the way. "Igor Ilyich, a relative has come to see you." A plump man of about 20, wearing a gray sweater and black trousers, was too drunk to be surprised. There were 30 other guests in the room, still noisily proclaiming toasts, ignoring Nina. Someone sat her at a table and even pushed some food toward her. Nina didn't know what to do next, so she simply remained silent, not daring to touch her food. She felt as if someone would grab her by the scruff of the neck, like a stray kitten, and simply throw her out. She was already beginning to regret having even decided on such a risky venture. Another 10 minutes passed, maybe even 20. Nina learned that Igor Ilyich was none other than the owner of this establishment, and that he was celebrating his birthday that day with his most distinguished guests. The situation turned out to be even more complicated than she thought. Nina had hoped to simply slip into the restaurant unnoticed and talk to someone about work there. She had even planned to arrange with the dishwashers that she would do their work for pennies. But now there was no way she could leave unnoticed. "Come here, Birdie. Who are you anyway?" Igor Ilyich suddenly sobered up and remembered that she was supposedly his relative. He decided to figure out what was going on, especially since he could tell from her expression that she was frightened. At first, he wanted to just throw this cold woman out, but then he decided that interrogating the poor thing would amuse him. The restaurant owner was naturally curious, and life hadn't presented him with any interesting surprises in a while. So why not mingle with ordinary people? Nina meekly approached the plump man. His gaze didn't seem malicious, and this calmed her a little. She decided to tell the truth. "I'm nobody, I just really need a job." She even hiccuped a few times in fright. The guests fell silent and began to listen to the interesting conversation. The restaurant owner poured water from a carafe and said, "Come on, drink it and tell me. Just don't lie, quote. Tell it like it is." Igor Ilyich was in a perfectly good mood. The girl clearly posed no danger. Just some kind of weak-willed fool, otherwise she wouldn't have lied so stupidly. That's what he thought when he heard her simple story. "I thought I could negotiate with the dishwashers without documents. I just wanted to earn money honestly, that's all," she said at the end. "It's turning out interesting. So you started our acquaintance with a lie and now you think I'll hire you?" Igor Ilyich laughed. A booming laugh. The kind only those who've had problems for a long time, or never had. "Well, then they would have fired me. That's happened many times. And I'm ready for any job. Absolutely any." Nina couldn't take it anymore and burst into tears. Any. "You know, our singer didn't show up for work today. Can you fill in for him?" Igor Ilyich found this proposal amusing. Nishenko had clearly never even seen a microphone, so he decided to put on a show for the guests, have some fun himself at the same time, and then fire the poor thing. Igor Ilyich didn't feel at all sorry for the girl. In his opinion, not all people are born to live like human beings. Some were destined to suffer their entire lives, so he didn't feel like he had to save anyone. "What do I have to sing?" Nina asked timidly, adding through her tears. "And if I can, will you hire me?" "Well, if they applaud you, yes, I will. Sing something to lift the spirits, surprise us, quote." Igor Ilyich took Nina by the arm and pulled her into the hall. The guests followed them. Nina took the microphone and closed her eyes. She heard on the street singing Olgrova's song and tried to reproduce the words. She couldn't miss this chance, even if it was given to her by a reprimand. So that everything would be fine and nothing would happen. She began the congratulatory song with these words and listened to herself in surprise. She spoke in a high, uncertain, even somewhat gritty voice. And then, out of nowhere, a pleasant, mesmerizing contralto emerged, as if a stranger with perfect pitch and a voice had come to greet her. She didn't open her eyes. She knew that if she saw Igor Ilyich, she'd hardly be able to call him that. He was clearly arrogant, self-absorbed, and didn't care about anyone. It seemed to be working out well. To her surprise, she remembered all the words and even made up a verse of her own, which wasn't in the song, to insert the birthday boy's name and thank him for his kindness. On that pleasant note, she finished singing. The hall was silent, and then applause broke out. At first sparse, then generous. Someone said, "Well, if after that you won't hire this brave girl, I will." Besides, she looked good. She just needed a change of clothes and a wash. After this phrase, Nina realized she hadn't made a fool of herself and finally decided to open her eyes. Igor Ilyich praised her with a fake smile. It was obvious he was disappointed, but he'd made his promise, so there was no way out. "I'll hire this wonderful girl myself." "Words must be kept," the owner said, slapping her roughly on the shoulder. So hard that she could barely stay on her feet. "This is my phone number. Call tomorrow. But not too early. We'll think of something. Put something in for this poor thing to take home." Quote. With a sweeping gesture, the owner motioned for the waitress to put something in for her to take home, and then gently hinted that it was time to leave. Just as Nina was about to step out onto the porch, a man rushed out, throwing on his coat. "Wait, you haven't been paid for your performance. Here, take these." Quote. He handed her several red bills, then introduced himself. "My name is Victor." "Oh, that's a lot." Nina blushed and added, "You may not understand. Igor Ilyich didn't invite me, and I actually handed him over because I don't have any documents and I need to work. I don't deserve it." Quote. She burst into tears. "What are you talking about? You're just a person who's gotten into trouble, and you know you deserve the same respect as everyone you've sung for. I really enjoyed your performance. And this Igor Ilyich, forgive me, but he's not a nice person at all. I'm sure he'll just make fun of you and not give you any work. Here's my phone number. Keep it. I understand it's hard to trust anyone in your situation, but I can help," Victor said, and then, after thinking a little more, he said, "No, you don't have to call. Let's do it this way." Quote. "I'll dial myself from your phone and call you myself." And before she could decide whether to believe him, he took the phone from her hand and waited for it to ring. Then he smiled with satisfaction. "Well, now everything will definitely be fine. Should I call a taxi?" "No, I don't care, I live nearby." Nina didn't say she was going to the tent at the garbage dump. She was afraid she'd scare off Victor, who, admittedly, could probably help with the work. She smiled gratefully at the tall, fair-haired man of about 30 and, waving cheerfully, ran off, without looking back, joyfully waving her bags. One day, she'll make Tanya happy with both money and food. And they'll treat all the neighbors at the dump, throw a feast for the whole world, and no one will ever say that Ninka can't survive in this world. Victor was right on target. All his predictions came true. The restaurant owner fed her breakfast, and every time Nina came, she was told he had no time. Finally, after a week, the waitress couldn't take it anymore. "Isn't it obvious that you shouldn't come anymore? This is no place for homeless people. Why didn't you tell her right away?" Tears welled up in Nina's eyes. "Because only people like you could understand that. Be glad you were fed then and the police weren't called." "Don't come again," the stern brunette replied. Nina didn't know what to do. Tanya was so happy that her charge's life was improving. She was looking forward to Nina even meeting a prince on a white horse and living a normal life. But it turned out that Nina was deceived, and Victor, who seemed more reliable and trustworthy, simply didn't answer the phone. They spent most of the money on medicine for Tanya and insulation for the tent. Health Tatiana's condition was rapidly deteriorating, and Nina was cringing at herself for not being able to help her. If they offered her anything, it was only inappropriate, and she could barely restrain herself from spitting in the faces of these impudent men. "Victor, remember I told you about him? He's coming in a week," Nina told Tatiana, trying to somehow console her. And again she tried to find a way out. In fact, she was absolutely certain that Victor had deliberately blocked her phone or simply changed his number. Perhaps, at first, under the influence of what he'd drunk, he wanted to help, but then simply changed his mind. Nina had no complaints against him. It was good that he helped her with money and warned her about the restaurant owner. Nina realized that you can't expect too much from people. Meanwhile, Victor had a serious reason for not calling. He recognized her at first sight, but said nothing, having heard from her halting story to Igor Lichu that she had lost her memory and documents. Perhaps he wouldn't have paid her any attention. Nina had changed dramatically, lost weight, looked haggard, and had the eyes of a hunted animal. And she was dressed in a way that made her unrecognizable as the former, pampered girl. But upon hearing her voice, he knew immediately, there could be no mistake. And to be sure of his rightness, he secretly followed Nina as she left the restaurant and confirmed that she truly remembered nothing. Victor and Nina had studied together at the conservatory. She was the daughter of a famous pianist. He was the son of a pop singer. Neither family wanted for anything. They fell in love and planned to marry. But Nina's father, Oleg Nikolaevich, had met a femme fatale. He wasn't bothered by the fact that this Anna had already been widowed 3 or 4 times and, after short marriages, had inherited her husband's fortunes. Oleg Nikolaevich lost his wife, Nina's mother, early on, and for the first time in a long time, fell in love, always telling everyone who warned him, yes, Anechka's fate was tragic, but that's more a reason to pity than to condemn. Okay, you love her, but why marry her? His friend, Victor's father, would say. Only then could she feel loved and truly needed. Oleg Nikolaevich was an incorrigible idealist, and just a year later, he developed a serious drinking habit, not without the help of his new wife. His wife fed him fatty foods and medicated him, despite knowing about his weak liver. Oleg Nikolaevich didn't listen to anyone and ultimately died in blissful innocence. Victor had no doubt that his widow's hands were clean, in the criminal sense of the word. She didn't poison him, she just brought about his quick death. And then it turned out that this same widow had a lover with a dark past. She brought him into the house, and hell began for Nina. She was forced out of her own home. "Nina, why are you putting up with this? Move in with me, we love each other." Victor begged his fiancée. "You're right. I just wanted to prove something, but she's already threatening me. Tomorrow I'll move in with you," Nina promised, and then suddenly disappeared. And it was only by pure chance that Victor found himself in a strange city for this Igor Ilyich's anniversary. His mother was invited, but she didn't want to go, so she sent her son in her place. The Machihanins and her lover were dangerous people. Rumors that the girl was alive could leak out. And it was possible that Victor was being followed. So he pretended to simply leave, but in reality, he was preparing to act. That night, he'll take both Nina and Tatiana by any means necessary and won't let his beloved go again. And I certainly won't bother you. Tatiana still couldn't get used to living in her own separate guest house. She went to visit her former friends from the street, and spent all the money Victor gave her on helping them restore their documents and somehow get settled in life. Of course not, said Nina. When Vidya showed her a photo of her parents, her memory began to return. She remembered that her stepmother and her lover had hit her on the head, right where the camera had been. The footage was restored, and in the end, the couple got what they deserved. Nina was able to reclaim her full inheritance. The stepmother was deprived of everything. Stay. Victor was grateful to Tatiana for becoming a guardian angel for his beloved wife and did everything he could to help the elderly woman recover. By the way, we'll be bothering you soon. We're going to have a little one. And Vidya's mom will be visiting more often, and you two don't seem to get along very well, Nina smiled. In fact, Vidya's mom was a woman of rather progressive views and only argued with Tatiana on philosophical matters, which clearly brought them both joy. Okay, then I'll teach him how not to live, Tatiana laughed. If you like the story, please support me with a thumbs up button. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. M.